This is the most beautiful place on earth. Everyone has their corner of this planet they like to call home. Western Massachusetts is my home. I've lived in the rural town of Heath, population 706, for the entirety of my almost 18 years of life, and every passing year of growing up here I discover something new and unique. Recently, my brother and I hiked Adams Mountain in Rowe, one town over from where I live. Despite being just 10 minutes from my house, it was the first time I had hiked this mountain in over 6 years. On the summit, we came upon a gorgeous view to the southeast, the rolling ridgelines of the Pioneer Valley highlighted by fading sun rays. Veering from the main trail a bit, we went to a spot labeled by a trail sign as the Perch. This was the true hidden gem of the mountain located practically in my backyard. The Perch is a small camping spot containing a camping grill, some firewood, an open-faced log cabin, and the same view of rolling hills and ridgelines, all located 2,000 feet up on the side of Adams Mountain. Having been inspired by Edward Abbey's account of becoming one with the Utah wilderness, I sat up here appreciating the perfection of the place I had lived all my life. We settled down in the lean-to with our tent, made a fire, and relaxed on the ridgeline as the daylight faded away. This was the prime Western Massachusetts experience. Camping, sitting by a fire, watching the sunset, being eaten alive by mosquitoes, and taking in the rolling mountains and surrounding wilderness, just appreciating it. These are the times when I love where I live the most. Hiking, camping, running my favorite trails, watching a sunset, exploring the Deerfield River. I wouldn't trade any of this for the world. Western Massachusetts is a hidden gem of New England, and for people 50 years down the road not to be able to fully discover, explore, or appreciate it because of human consequences would truly be a tragedy. We must appreciate the beauty and the distinctiveness of this area and protect it from destruction at all costs. Western Massachusetts and its encompassing environment are special and need to be preserved. While Shelburne Falls itself is not a town, it is a village that is part of two different towns centered around the Deerfield River. The river cuts directly through the village, creating a picturesque New England community. Many have taken notice of this special place, including 3 Hollywood productions, the likes of which have featured Kate Winslet, Robert Downey Jr., and most recently Michael C. Hall in the Showtime reboot of Dexter. While extra attention from the outside world and widespread recognition of our area is always appreciated, it's important we don't let waves of tourism jeopardize local environmental integrity. More people coming to our area leads to growing problems of people throwing trash into the woods, crowding the rivers, and more efforts for industrialization. Enjoyment is fine. Abuse of the land, on the other hand, is what will determine the fate of our area. To get an expert opinion on local river use and the impacts of tourism, as well as conservation efforts in the area, I sat down with Andrea Donlin, a river steward for the Connecticut River Conservancy. Andrea is a resident of Buckland and is responsible for working on aquatic conservation projects locally and communicating those projects to the public.
My name is Andrea Donlin. I work for the Connecticut River Conservancy as a river steward. I work on a variety of river-related issues in the whole watershed, mainly focusing on the Massachusetts part of the Connecticut River watershed. We're here at Gardner Falls Dam on the Deerfield River, which is the second dam upstream from the Connecticut River confluence. It's important for people to realize that rivers are public resources, so the water belongs to us. Tourism dollars coming into the region can be an important lifeline and ways of staying economically afloat. There are weekends where there's just thousands of people out on the river. Where are they going to the bathroom? Where are they parking? It can be really challenging for small towns to deal with all these issues.
Local resident Sunny Crawford moved here 40 years ago. She recently wrote an article in the Greenfield Recorder regarding her experience with growing tourism in Buckland. She spoke about being the only tuber on the river for miles back then, contrasting it to the figure of 1,200 people in the river and in Mohawk Park last August. We take our access to local resources such as the Deerfield River for granted because we see them every day and use them at our leisure. But what if this wasn't the case in 50 years? What if there was such a large local population and amount of tourism that river use had to be facilitated? It's important that we do our part to contribute to the goals set forth by the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a resolution drafted in early 2019 by 67 Congress members that sets the goals of environmental preservation, protection, and economic stabilization for the next 30 years. In order to achieve net zero global emissions by 2050, clean air and water, access to nature, and a sustainable environment, individual efforts must be made by each company, organization, and us as individuals. The most egregious and recent example of major company impact on our environment was the Barnhart manufacturing chemical spill 2 years ago. Gallons of sulfuric acid leaked from their building straight into the North River. The North River is a tributary of the Deerfield River where hundreds of people are fishing, boating, and swimming every day. It is also only 3 miles upstream from Sunburn Beach, a widely popular swimming spot for locals. Environmental police weren't even aware of the incident until several hours after, when locals began to report the massive amount of fish deaths. The general public wasn't notified until hours after, and river use was suspended for 1 to 2 days. Tens of thousands of fish died as a result of this spill. Hundreds of fish were dead on the surface and banks of the river. A later report found that 53 total gallons of 93% sulfuric acid leaked from the exterior tank. About 28 of these gallons poured into the river, while the other 25 seeped into the ground. Barnhart Manufacturing has a recorded history of failed safety checks on some of their equipment and has faced minimal punishment from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection.
There's a lot of deference made to corporations and how much profits they make, and so that sometimes seems to take precedence over like the greater good. Historically, rivers were dumping grounds, and they're not so much anymore, but still people do illegally dump things and litter along rivers.
Examples like this cannot be allowed to stand. Our environment deserves better, and letting companies get by without proper compliance to guidelines leads to horrific incidents such as this chemical spill. We need to hold companies accountable. We need to hold ourselves accountable. We are all responsible for protecting this area, and opposing morally unacceptable practices is part of that responsibility. On an individual level as well, we can do our part to cut down on emissions and waste. Recycle, compost, bike instead of drive, use public transportation, leave outdoor areas the way you found them, and help improve them by picking up trash. Donate to organizations such as Connecticut River Conservancy, or other groups like the Franklin Land Trust or the Trustees. In about a year, I'll be leaving for college. This reality has made me truly stop and reflect on what Western Mass means to me and how far I want to stray from it. As a kid, I never liked this area. It was boring, took too long to get to a store, and there was no one who lived near me that was my age. I always saw it as a bubble to finally be able to escape when I turned 18. The last 2 years in the pandemic, however, have made me totally rethink that. Being stuck at home and forced to be involved with the environment around my house, I grew a new understanding and love for it. I began to look forward to going on runs every day just to discover new places I hadn't seen before. New views, new roads, new trees, and occasional wildlife. I love this area. It will always be home to me no matter where I end up in the next couple years. My hope is that it still looks the same when I come back.